Trump's massive ICE deportation raids have kicked off in cities nationwide, and they only seem to be getting bigger. And as JD Vance is fighting Catholic bishops over it, you have some celebrating, others devastated. We almost had a full-fledged trade war with Colombia over the weekend as things spiraled out of control. US stocks went panic mode over new Chinese AI advancements and Deepseek. And the people who lost their homes in the California fires have way more to worry about now. We're talking about all that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, how it's being covered, and how people are reacting to it in a world that feels more and more like we're just stuck inside of a snow globe and some asshole keeps shaking it. But hey, for today's big dive into the news, let's start with this. Trump's only been in office for 1 week, and it already appears he's upset that there haven't been enough deportations. And so as a result, Trump officials have directed Immigration and Customs Enforcement to aggressively increase the number of people they arrest each day, according to 4 sources who spoke to the Washington Post. And specifically, the Post reported that ICE is now being asked to increase the number of arrests they make each day from a couple of hundred to at least 1,200 to 1,500. With the sources saying that managers will be held accountable for missing those quotas and that officers should cancel personal leave because Trump expects arrest operations to take place around the clock. You know, this is absolutely massive for a few different reasons. First of all, it appears to go against the promises of White House border czar Tom Homan, who has been saying for weeks that ICE wouldn't be doing mass roundups, saying instead they'd be prioritizing undocumented immigrants with criminal records and gang members. But as the Post here explained, the quotas issued this weekend would place ICE officers under more pressure to seize a wider range of potential deportees to avoid reprimand, including immigrants who have not committed crimes. Now with this, on the other side, you had an ICE official who wasn't authorized to discuss the matter, saying that the list of criminal suspects was long enough that ICE officials could meet quotas. But there's also, as Paul Hunker, for example, a former ICE chief counsel in Dallas, argued that arresting serious offenders takes a lot of planning time and staff resources to track them down. And notably, more time and resources than quotas might allow, with him explaining. Quotas will incentivize ICE officers to arrest the easiest people to arrest rather than the people that are dangerous non-citizens. And this also, as we're seeing experts warning that broad roundups are unsafe and counterproductive because they create panic in immigrant communities and draw public backlash. And this is another concern with these sweeping raids, or that the wrong people are going to be detained or arrested. And in fact, we've already been seeing reports of that in the first week of Trump's immigration enforcement efforts, even before these quotas. With, for example, numerous reports circulating about members of the Navajo Nation being wrongfully detained in immigration sweeps. And this also as the mayor of Newark, New Jersey has accused ICE of detaining multiple US citizens, including a military veteran, during raids on the city. Which, very notably, this is coming as ICE raids have already been scaled up significantly during Trump's first week in office, even before the quotas. Raids have been reported in numerous cities and states across the country, with one of the most high-profile efforts taking place in Chicago. And in Chicago, ICE explicitly released a statement announcing it had begun conducting enhanced targeted operations in the city on Sunday at the objections of top Democratic leaders. So again, not just one place. Nationwide, ICE reported high numbers of detentions and arrests, with this reportedly including more than 500 arrests and around 400 detentions on both Thursday and Friday. But then also yesterday, those numbers jumped dramatically, with ICE reporting that it had arrested 956 people and detained another 554. And so a big jump not only from Thursday and Friday, but a big increase from the Biden administration, which saw about 300 average daily arrests last year. And with all this, we've seen the kind of general range of responses you'd expect. Many on the left condemning the raids and people on the right applauding them. And among the notable reactions here, you had Selena Gomez going viral for posting an Instagram story of herself crying about the general situation in regards to immigrants.
I just want to say that I'm so sorry. All my people are getting attacked. The children. They don't understand. I'm so sorry. I wish I could do something, but I can't. I don't know what to do. I'll try everything, I promise.
And so that got a ton of attention in a number of places, but especially on X. It was trending super high this morning and getting a lot of mixed reactions. Right, on one side, you had a lot of people condemning Selena and the video, accusing her of trying to get attention, saying that celebrities shouldn't weigh in on these matters. Others also taking aim at her views about immigrants or calling for her to be deported, though she was born in Texas. And in fact, it appears that that video got so much backlash and attention that Selena ended up deleting it and posted another story with the text, apparently it's not okay to show empathy for people. Though there, it appears that she's now deleted that as well. But then also, on the other side, there were plenty of people defending her, arguing among other things that it is important for celebrities to speak out and that we encourage them to do that, so we shouldn't tear them down when they do. People also pointing out that she's been vocal about immigration for years, even producing a Netflix documentary back in 2019 about undocumented families in the States. But then also beyond that, right, expanding it a bit, we saw a number of people slamming the Trump administration's decision to allow ICE raids in so-called sensitive locations like churches, hospitals, and schools. With very notably there, that including top clergy leaders like the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, USCCB, which issued a statement statement saying, turning places of care, healing, and solace into places of fear and uncertainty for those in need while endangering the trust between pastors, providers, educators, and the people they serve will not make our communities safer. But that statement also attracted its own backlash from Vice President J.D. Vance, who slammed the remark.
As a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line? I think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has frankly not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for, and I hope, again, as a devout Catholic, that they'll do better.
Now, very notably with that, you also had a lot of experts pointing out that Vance seems to be referring to the fact that the USCCB has a massive refugee resettlement agency. And they're pointing out that refugees are not illegal immigrants. And in fact, we saw the organization itself echoing that point in a statement responding to Vance's comments, with them noting that the funding that they receive from the US federal government goes towards refugees, all of whom are, quote, vetted and approved for the program by the federal government while outside of the United States. They then also hit back at Vance by emphasizing that their efforts are in line with Catholic religious values, saying, faithful to the teaching of Jesus Christ, the Catholic Church has a long history of serving refugees. But for now, that is where we are with this specific aspect, and I gotta ask you, what are your thoughts with all this? You know, whether it be this news or something else that stands out to you today, I'd love to hear from you in those comments down below, because I want this, yes, to be a news show, but also a conversation. And in fact, that's why we end every show with a dive into the previous show's comments. But then next up today, it's not just raids. Donald Trump just started his administration's first large-scale deportation flights of migrants this weekend, and it has been dramatic. With the situation reportedly hurting relations with multiple Latin American countries, it nearly sparked a trade war, and it possibly led to a unique deal with El Salvador. But let's start with Colombia, because yesterday morning, some military planes filled with would-be deportees were supposed to leave from San Diego to Colombia. However, that plan then had to be scrapped after Colombia denied the plane's entry. And things quickly progressed from there. You know, just after the news broke that Colombia wasn't going to play ball, Trump wrote on Truth Social, I was just informed that 2 repatriation flights from the United States with a large number of illegal criminals were not allowed to land in Colombia. This order was given by Colombia's socialist president, Gustavo Petro, who was already very unpopular amongst his people. Petro's denial of these flights has jeopardized the national security and public safety of the United States, so I have directed my administration to immediately take the following urgent and decisive retaliatory measures. With him then going on to threaten some serious penalties on Colombia for this move, such as a 25% tariff that was set to start ASAP, followed by a 50% tariff if things didn't change within a week. Also, on top of that, there would be a travel ban on Colombian officials and a revocation of their visas alongside that of their allies and supporters. And that was in addition to threats that included visa sanctions on all party members, family members, and supporters of the Colombian government, enhanced customs and border protection inspections of all Colombian nationals and cargo on national security grounds, as well as IEEPA, Treasury, banking, and financial sanctions to be fully imposed. And then, in response to that, we saw Colombian President Gustavo Petro writing a very long post on X, and I'm just not gonna get into everything there since this is not an audiobook and there was so much said, but the main things we saw there is that he was defiant of Trump, with Petro calling himself stubborn and warning that Trump wouldn't be able to strong-arm him into a policy in writing. You can try to carry out a coup with your economic strength and your arrogance, like with what happened to Allende. I resisted torture and I resist you. With the background there for you being that he used to be a leftist rebel in Colombia before being imprisoned and tortured. He also went on to accuse Trump of being racist and thinking Colombians were inferior, and added that, quote, I am informed that you impose a 50% tariff on the fruits of our human labor to enter the United States, and I do the same. With Petro then going on to warn that Colombia would just turn to other countries across the globe for trade and relations. And it appeared like, there it is, the Trump administration almost had its first official trade war, except it at least appears that the crisis was avoided because the White House announced last night that Colombia, quote, has agreed to all of President Trump's terms, including to accept military flights of deportees. Though I will say we're gonna have to wait to see how this plays out in the long term, because, you know, Trump did say that the threats that he made would be held in reserve. And if we did see these tit-for-tat tariffs being imposed, it would mean we'd probably be paying way more for coffee, as that's one of Colombia's biggest exports to the States. Now, also with this, notably, Colombia's foreign minister seconded that some kind of deal was in place, saying in a televised address that we have overcome the impasse with the United States government. Now there, I will say, looking at the specifics of this mess, it appears that one of the issues seemed to be how the Trump administration was deporting people. Or we saw Colombian officials saying they felt that their citizens weren't being treated with dignity by being thrown onto military planes, which aren't exactly known for their comfort. And so because of this, Petro announced that the presidential plane would be available to pick up deportees. Also, I'll say that the use of military planes to conduct these flights, it does seem to be controversial with a number of countries, because it wasn't just Colombia that denied the flight, right? Mexico actually similarly denied such a flight this weekend. Though I will say that got overshadowed by a looming trade war and troops along the border to stop what Trump's called a migrant invasion. Though it's not to say that all all such flights were denied. Where reportedly Guatemala took in the flights on Friday without any issues. Although even in situations where commercial planes were used for otherwise routine deportation flights, there were other problems. Like with on Saturday, for example, when Brazil reportedly was outraged after 88 deportees who agreed to go back to Brazil arrived in handcuffs. With one person on the flight who was a 31-year-old computer technician claiming, on the plane, they didn't give us water, we were tied hands and feet, they wouldn't even let us go to the bathroom. And another claiming things have already changed with Trump, immigrants are treated as criminals. Also, another issue throughout all this is how to deal with asylum seekers. Because Trump tried to announce that he was reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy, which pretty much meant that asylum seekers would have to sit around in Mexico while their case was processed. However, with that, we saw Mexico's president saying that even reinstating the policy would need a bilateral agreement, and they haven't given that, which is possibly why the Trump administration is exploring a unique asylum agreement with El Salvador, where so pretty much instead of accepting refugees ourselves, we would send them to a safe third country, in this case, El Salvador. With one of the things bolstering this plan is the fact that unlike the last time that Trump was in office, El Salvador is a vastly more safe country. Now that arguably there came at the cost of a lot of civil rights, but the fact remains that crime overall has plummeted. In fact, so much so that it went from the murder capital of the world to having the fewest in the Western Hemisphere. Though I will say that the details of the plan there are still in the works, so we're gonna have to wait and see how that goes. But while we wait to see how things are gonna play out on all these different fronts, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? But then to shift gears to a different kind of news, it has been a bad few days to be in the AI business if you're an American or European. Because we just saw the software and hardware companies underpinning the industry losing at least $1 trillion in valuation after a group of Chinese researchers released Deepseek. So the company behind Deepseek actually first released it in late December before getting its most recent R1 update on January 20th. But since then, independent researchers have tested it and reportedly found it is far more efficient and arguably more powerful than ChatGPT, which used to be the premier large language model AI. With reports also saying that Deepseek has a bunch of other features that are unique and interesting for AI nerds. With, for example, one being that it apparently is more transparent about how it gets an answer and delivers a train of thought that helps people see how it deduced an answer. With the company behind the model saying they hope that this transparency will help increase how accurate it can be in the long run as users point out issues. It also touts itself as open source, which is often considered a huge plus in the tech community. Although some have pointed out that that may not be completely true since it's difficult to verify some things with the budget and hardware constraints of an everyday person. But regardless, it has completely shaken up the industry, especially because of how little money was allegedly spent on it and how quickly it was made. Where the company claims it took just 2 months to develop, it costs less than $6 million and runs on far worse hardware than other models, meaning that it is far more efficient. Which, I mean, that is a far cry from the tens of millions to billions of dollars that other companies have reportedly spent. I mean, 2 years ago, for example, OpenAI claimed that it cost them $700,000 a day to keep ChatGPT running, without reportedly accounting for server costs and access to supercomputers that actually run the AI. You know, while they have paid users to offset those costs, it still amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars a year in just maintenance costs, even if you account for pricing going down as tech gets better. And that also seems evident in the recent pledge OpenAI and other major tech companies made when they promised to spend $500 billion to build out the US's AI infrastructure. And then the final cherry on top that touches on that is that Deepseek is cheap for people wanting to get more than what the free features offer. Right? ChatGPT costs $20 a month, whereas Deepseek is closer to a few bucks at most. Now, with that said, it's important to know that some have doubted Deepseek's overall numbers and feel they're being dishonest about how much it actually costs to develop. Though I will say, whatever the truth is, a number of investors seemingly got scared, with a meaningful number quick to sell off AI stocks. I mean, as of recording, we saw Oracle stock drop nearly 13%, the European company ASML fell about 7.5%, and Nvidia, who have notably touted themselves as the premier AI company as much of the industry relies on their chips, they lost over 16%. As I'm recording. It's now at a $560 billion loss, making it the single biggest individual drop in the market ever. Also, with this, I'll say as far as how much this hurts OpenAI, we don't really know yet because they're not a publicly traded company, but it is probably not one of the best signs right now that DeepSeek is topping things like the App Store. And notably, there's also been a lot of talk about the lack of a response from figures like Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI so far. He, as I'm recording this, has been silent about DeepSeek despite tweeting about his own company's new releases. With some there feeling like the silence itself was damning. And then we'll get to more news in just a moment. But first, let's make this the year you say goodbye to those ruined days after a fun night out. Right? And with that big game coming up, I've got something game-changing to share, especially if you enjoy having a few drinks but hate how you feel the next day. Meet Zbiotics pre-alcohol, today's sponsor, and your new best friend for better mornings. Right? And this isn't just another supplement. We're talking about the world's first genetically engineered probiotic created by PhD scientists specifically to tackle those rough mornings after drinking. And here's the science, right? That awful morning after feeling, it isn't just about dehydration. dehydration. There's actually a toxic byproduct in your gut that's the real troublemaker, right? Pre-alcohol then produces an enzyme that breaks down the nasty stuff before it can wreck your day. And also just a pro tip from someone who uses it, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, then stay hydrated, pace yourself, and you're golden. No more wasting entire days recovering. And I've already stocked up for the big game. I might even hand them out as party favors. And so if you're ready to try it yourself, head to zbiotics.com/DeFranco or scan the QR code and use code DeFranco for 15% off your first order. And in fact, they are so confident that you're gonna love it, they offer a 100% money back guarantee. Like seriously, if you're not satisfied, they'll refund you, no questions asked. That's zbiotics.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco at checkout for 15% off. But then to shift gears, I've got a little bit of good news, some bad news, even more bad news, and a little bit of more bad news on top of that if you live in Southern California. Now to start with, the good news is that the wildfires appear to be pretty much under control now, with authorities reporting that all three major infernos, Palisades, Eaton, and Hughes, were between 90 and 98% contained as of Sunday, with fire crews getting some much needed relief the same day as rainfall doused some areas and was expected to continue in scattered bursts over the following days. Though, as we talked about last time, the rain also brought fears of flash floods and mudslides that could create toxic debris flows, right? Because you've got tons of ash from incinerated cars, electronics, batteries, building materials, paints, furniture, everything that burned. And among other pollutants, it carries pesticides, asbestos, plastics, and lead. But also, as these wildfires are simmering down, survivors are facing a different, less natural threat: their fellow humans. With seeing reports from the Washington Post that in Los Angeles County, median rents surged 20% from their already high levels before the fires, which, just an FYI, is definitely illegal. Right? Because after the fires broke out, Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order capping price increases for hotels, housing, gas, and other goods at 10%. Yet what we saw is that in nearly 30 cities within the county, according to the Post, rent shot up well past that limit, and in some places, it's fucking insane. With the Encino and Glendora neighborhoods, for example, reportedly seeing prices go up as much as 150%. And actually, if you narrow it down to specific zip codes, the picture gets even worse, with us seeing parts of Sherman Oaks and Valley Village, among other neighborhoods, watching their rents more than triple. And so naturally, with this, we saw the Post reaching out to some of the landlords for an explanation. You know, maybe they've got something to say. But when a reporter called the real estate firm that listed a 2-bed, 2-bath rental whose price apparently rose nearly 40%, the person who answered the phone reportedly said, "Do yourself a favor and jump in the lake," apparently followed by an expletive. But hey, here's the thing. Even if they don't want to talk to a journalist, they may have to answer to police. Right? And that because the California Attorney General's office is reportedly investigating tips of rent gouging, and they've reportedly issued over 500 warning letters to hotels and landlords so far. With us also seeing the AG saying at a press briefing a week ago,
these predators are looking at the disaster with dollar signs in their eyes, be it landlords, short-term rentals, or hotels, price gouging evacuees, or predatory buyers swooping in with low-ball property offers, whether it be scams or looting. You can be sure we will hold you accountable.
But then also for people who left their homes, price gouging isn't the only thing they have to worry about. Right? And that because we're seeing CBS News reporting that insurance companies like State Farm and Allstate, they've dropped thousands of existing California policies and or stopped underwriting new ones in the months before the wildfires, with many people either going uninsured or switching to the FAIR plan, which is California's publicly organized, privately run insurer of last resort. And in fact, roughly 1,400 of the Palisades' 9,000 homes were reportedly covered by the plan in 2024, which, I mean, that number is huge. It's more than quadruple the number in 2020. And so now those who are covered by insurance, they have to file claims and wrangle with insurance adjusters over how much they're owed. And unfortunately, we've seen with previous natural disasters, you're gonna have homeowners often getting way less than the actual cost of damages, spending years trying to squeeze the rest out of their insurers. And one of the things here is that goes for the FAIR plan as well, right? Not just normal plans. Though fortunately for anyone who is completely displaced, insurers are legally required to immediately pay 1/3 of the estimated value of their belongings and a minimum of 4 months rent. But then also, even after the dust settles on this wildfire season, you've got policymakers concerned about the permanent effects we're gonna see on California's insurance market when the next one comes. With, for example, Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo estimating a couple of weeks ago that the wildfires would cost insurers as much as $30 billion, which is a record for the state, with the total cost, including non-insured damages, estimated to reach $40 billion, which I will say, as high as that is, pales in comparison to the $150 billion estimate released by AccuWeather earlier this month. And all of this notably not happening in a bubble, right? We've seen other states like Florida and Louisiana struggle to manage their insurance markets in recent years, with the situation appearing to just be getting worse worse and worse after each successive disaster, from Hurricane Ian to Hurricane Helene to Hurricane Milton. But then, in more big international news we need to talk about, the ceasefire deals involving Israel, Hamas, and Hezbollah have barely survived the weekend. And even though they did, that doesn't mean that more people haven't been killed. Which, on that note, let's start in Lebanon, where Israeli troops reportedly killed 24 people yesterday. Right, because connected to that, yesterday it was the deadline set in the November ceasefire deal for the full withdrawal of Israeli troops. And in turn, Hezbollah would then end its armed presence in southern Lebanon, with the Lebanese army essentially taking its place to prevent it and other armed groups from conducting combat operations against Israel. But in recent days, Israeli officials accused Lebanon and Hezbollah of failing to uphold their end of the agreement. Now with that, the Lebanese government for their part has said that it can't send its forces into areas until Israeli troops withdrawn. And Hezbollah, they warned that it would basically consider the ceasefire null and void if Israel failed to beat the deadline. And so with that, Israel, they have reportedly withdrawn from southern Lebanon's western sector and several other positions in the center and the east. But on Friday, it confirmed that it wouldn't meet the deadline for getting all of its troops out. With that, then leading to the White House calling for a short, temporary ceasefire extension. And while those negotiations began yesterday, hundreds of people ignored warnings from the Lebanese and Israeli militaries and moved to return home, with people being seen marching back toward their still Israeli-occupied villages along the border. And this notably coming as Hezbollah's TV station appeared to encourage people to return south, with in some places convoys arriving waving the yellow and green flag of the group. And so the Israeli military, it reportedly opened fire several times, killing those 24 I mentioned, as well as wounding more than 130, according to Lebanon's health ministry. Though this, as an Israeli spokesperson, claimed that Hezbollah had sent agitators to southern Lebanon to inflame tensions, with the IDF also saying in a statement that it fired, quote, warning shots at, quote, suspects who approached its troops. But despite all that, by late last night, Israel and Lebanon agreed to extend the deadline for Israeli forces to pull out. And specifically, according to a statement from the White House, the arrangement between Lebanon and Israel, monitored by the United States, will continue to be in effect until February 18, 2025. With that statement also saying that negotiations would begin for the return of Lebanese prisoners captured after October 7th, 2023. And so we're gonna have to wait to see what happens there. In the meantime, we then have to turn our attention to the Israel-Hamas ceasefire and how that also almost fell apart this weekend. Which, to go back to Saturday, Hamas freed 4 female Israeli soldiers and Israel released some 200 Palestinian prisoners. But then, with the Israeli government claiming there was another female civilian hostage that should have been released first. Right, a woman by the name of Arbel Yahud. And you see, that's because the ceasefire agreement had stipulated that civilian women should be returned before female soldiers. And also with that, you had Israel accusing Hamas of failing to provide details on the conditions of hostages set to be freed in the remaining 5 weeks of the ceasefire's first phase. So then yesterday we saw the Israeli military blocking thousands of displaced Palestinians from traveling back to their homes in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, which notably is another one of the main promises of the first phase of the ceasefire. And like in Lebanon, Israeli soldiers reportedly fired on the crowd several times, killing 2 people according to Gazan health officials. So this is the Israeli military defended itself by claiming it identified several gatherings of dozens of suspects who had advanced toward Israeli forces and posed a threat to them, with them then claiming that that led to them firing warning shots. But again, despite that, the deal has survived for now, with Hamas now reportedly agreeing to release 3 hostages, including Yahud on Thursday, which is slightly ahead of the previously agreed upon release date for 3 more hostages. And so with all that, we saw early this morning the checkpoints opening up and tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians beginning returning home to northern Gaza. Though of course, they are largely returning home to ruins. And this notably as the second and far more difficult phase of the ceasefire deal hasn't yet been negotiated. Right, Hamas says it won't release the remaining 60 or so hostages unless Israel ends the war, but Netanyahu says he is still committed to destroying the group and ending its nearly 18-year rule over Gaza. I mean, so really, we're far from knowing how this thing's gonna end. And of course, all of this is playing out as there is now a new aspect to everything, Donald Trump being the president of the United States. Or at the very least, it shifted things, some just referring to Trump as a wild card. With that sort of thinking, you've had people pointing to Trump speaking to reporters on Air Force One after a meeting with the King of Jordan and saying this about Gaza.
I mean, you're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing.
And with that, you had Trump specifically suggesting Palestinians leave Gaza or be taken into Jordan and Egypt temporarily or long term, and also saying
almost everything's demolished and people are dying there. So I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing in a different location where they can maybe live in peace.
And so part of what we saw with the reactions were people going, well, what do you mean by that? Right, asking, what are you actually suggesting? People claiming that it sounds a lot like ethnic cleansing. With, for example, the director of one Palestinian rights group saying to, quote, clean Gaza immediately after the war would in fact be a continuation of the war through the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. And there, what we've seen in response as a filming is a senior Trump administration official saying, quote, you cannot demand that people remain in an uninhabitable place for political reasons, with them then also adding that Palestinians might be provided with an assurance they could eventually return. But of course, course, as we've seen reported by The Guardian, there would be very little trust in any offer of temporary relocation outside of Gaza to allow for reconstruction, especially given the history of repeated displacements starting with the initial expulsion of roughly 700,000 Palestinians after the creation of Israel. But at that time, many reportedly thought that they were just leaving temporarily and for decades held on to the keys for homes they hoped to reclaim. And that's without mentioning the far-right Israeli politicians, right? They welcomed Trump's proposal, but also didn't give any indication they saw it as only a temporary solution. With one, for example, writing on X that the idea of helping them find other places to start a new, good life is a great idea, with him then going on to say he would work closely to ensure that there is an operational plan to implement this as soon as possible. And then another similarly vowing to work with the government on a plan, saying, when the president of the world's greatest superpower, Trump, personally brings up this idea, it is worth the Israeli government implementing it. Promote emigration now. But then, with all this, Jordan and Egypt have firmly rejected the idea that they would take in refugees from Gaza. And this also, as many Palestinians have no interest in leaving. With, for example, one who was returning to the north today telling The Guardian, whether the ceasefire succeeds or not, we will never leave Gaza City and the north again, even if Israel would send a tank for each one of us. No more displacement. So a lot changing, a lot to keep an eye on, and a lot still developing. But then, final thing today, let's talk about that last show with some commentary brought to you by Wake and Make Coffee. Because while coffee prices have been on the rise and there's some uncertainty in the space right now, over at wakeandmake.com, I got some awesome for you. Whether it be our famous 3 staple rows, guiding light, happy medium, or dark matter, all of which actually you can get right now for 50% off your first bags. Plus, we also have the new International Coffee of the Month Club, where every single month, directly to your door, you get a brand new roast to try. So yeah, get some fantastic coffee over at wakeandmake.com. It helps support the show. But like I said, let's dive into those comments in some commentary. And unsurprisingly, there were a lot of comments about ADHD, with one of the most popular being, love how this starts with, if you have ADHD, you're going to die sooner. And then Phil takes the 20 minutes to get to why, as if testing our ability to pay attention. Which one, objectively funny, but two, every single show, I will always stress this, we have time codes, both in the description and at the bottom of the video if you hover over it. So if you ever want to jump around, you're itching to get to that one story, you can. But then also, in addition to comments like that we saw, as an adult with recently diagnosed ADHD, let me tell you, it's not alcohol or smoking that'll get me, can't stand either. It's the executive dysfunction, time management, and lack of motivation to do tasks necessary to my well-being that are amplified by anxiety and depression. The world does not move slowly enough for me to handle it and me. Some of y'all also chiming in, if anything related to ADHD is going to make my life shorter, it's definitely my reluctance to follow through with making doctor's appointments and returning phone calls. We also saw Ronnie sharing, I'm an adult woman with ADHD, saying I was diagnosed with depression at the age of 9, but only diagnosed with ADHD at 30. One of the things I never see experts talk about is how ADHD can cause depression. Many only treat the symptom and not the cause, leaving people with having to deal with lifelong struggles with depression. That feeling of never being good enough, feeling like you are hated or did something wrong, or major contributions to that depression. But then Ronnie adding, life has been 200 times better since being on ADHD medication, and my psych is currently weaning me off the antidepressants. And then, as far as other conversations, there was unsurprisingly a lot of comments about Donald Trump and that interview and the updates. And there were a few different things being hit on in the comments regarding the interview, right? Regarding Trump saying that he may shut FEMA down and that the states can just figure out how to deal with it and there can be kind of a more direct relationship. We saw comments like Maxine's that read, let the states handle it. As someone who lives in Texas, that terrifies me. Our energy grid is hot garbage. We literally cannot handle anything by ourselves. Also, something else that stuck out to a number of people was Trump talking about Biden and pardons, with some mocking Trump here, saying this guy went around giving everybody pardons, the man who pardoned 1,500 people in one go. Meanwhile, Murray saying, why does Trump think Biden needed to pardon himself? Didn't his Supreme Court say presidents can do whatever the fuck they want? And the presidential immunity thing was something that just kind of kept getting hit on, with people saying Trump implying he might prosecute Biden, completely forgetting the presidential immunity ruling he pushed for is disgusting. But with all that said, let me end today on a non-specific comment that read, thanks, Phil. I wasn't sure if I could function without the daily dose of existential crisis. I know you're joking, but you're welcome. I just hope this 20 to 30 minute daily show, it consolidates a lot and it can be a big part of your news diet rather than just being a small part of just an all-consuming thing. We got natural disasters, political chaos. There's a new culture war thing popping up every day. People are freaking out. It genuinely does feel, I know I opened the show with it, but it genuinely feels like we are stuck inside of a snow globe and some asshole keeps shaking it. And if you do not compartmentalize, you do not set around times to just be a human outside of the fucking chaos of the world, that you don't have something that you can hold on to and be like, okay, it'll drag you down to a place that'll be very hard to get out of. But that, my friends, is the end of your Monday evening, Tuesday morning dive into the news. And just remember, you get a brand new Philip DeFranco show every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.